Hi, this is Joe Mullings with The Other Side. Today from Israel is Michal Geva. Michal is the co-founder and managing partner at Triventures. And Michal, thank you for joining us today all the way from Israel. And where are you exactly in Israel?
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. I'm actually at home. Everybody here is at home. We have to work from home for the past 10 days now.
Wow. Wow.
Just a couple of hours ago, we were completely curfewed. So, certainly, new era here and in the world. Very bizarre times.
Very bizarre times. What are the guidelines of the curfew? Are there anything specific? You just can't walk out of the house at all?
Well, you can go get some food. You can go get medical treatment or drugs, and you can go out for very limited essential workers and up to 100 meters away from your home if you want to take a little hike or a little walk with the dog. 100-meter.
Wow.
That's about 150 steps, I would say, not that much.
Yeah. And Israel, because we do a lot of work over in Israel, you had closed down the borders quite earlier than most, was typical. Israel is always prudent in making sure people stay safe and doing the right thing. Did that have an impact on where we are right now in regards to the number of people sick there in country?
Well, I can tell you that we have almost 2,500 sick people. We did close our borders first of all, from China and Asia probably a month ago, and then 2 weeks ago from all of Europe, a little bit over 2 weeks ago from Europe. And I guess things could have been worse, but things are escalating. Every 3, 4 days, the numbers are multiplying themselves, probably like other countries. And we still do not know if we're going to be the Italy slash Spain kind of version of it, or we'll get on a different trajectory. I guess too early to tell, but they're taking a lot of very, very, very severe measures, like this curfew. I think we're one of the only countries in the world that the government has decided to hack to everybody's phones for basically using the digital footprint that we leave behind us in order to know where are we geolocated and be able to do the epidemiologic kind of route in a more efficient way. So we've been, in a way, packed for the past week. So a lot of very, very bizarre measures, which I hope will be able to put us on a different trajectory than most of Europe.
Yeah, and Israel is usually compared to most as a overly surveilled state, again, from a survival perspective, as well as healthcare. And I want to jump into that in a moment. But I had not heard that before, and that's super interesting because one of the things that Wuhan did really well was not just identified who was sick, but also identified who had come into contact with them in the previous week or so before, and then were able to reverse engineer that and head off at the pass what was going on with the individuals.
Yeah, very true. And they've been doing it religiously for the first probably 150 patients that they were dripping. It wasn't that tsunami of multiplying each few days, but we would all get, the whole route of every single person that was infected, basically telling us what flight he was on, where are the places that he or she were, what streets, what stores, everything, and it would be part of the news. And people that were in contact or were in those places were obligated to get self quarantine. And then when it got to the hundreds earlier this week, they have took a very radical decision, the parliament, and basically utilized the surveillance technologies to hack. It's again, they're not looking at who's talking with who and looking at content, but certainly the geolocation to enable to see, and now basically every single person that is confirmed as infected, all the people that were in his premise are getting an automatic WhatsApp or SMS that are saying you have been next to a patient that was confirmed and you should go self-quarantine yourself.
Wow, that's powerful. I have not heard that before, and I'm not surprised that's coming out of Israel. Certainly the epicenter of all things digital, cloud, and that's a powerful tool, and it always comes back to the trade-off of privacy versus security versus at this point, you know, we're in a survival mode right now, and Israel's accustomed to that, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I guess we have a lot of experience in ad hoc situations, and there's certainly huge amount of efforts from all of the different units to put their heads together. There's a lot of activity on innovation. We have seen actually a very nice first step of that was with Sheba Medical Center. Sheba is the largest hospital in Israel. It has about 2,000 beds. It's the largest governmental hospital. And they were the first to build actually an ad hoc hospital to basically host and take care of the corona patients. And they've done it on the premise of the hospital from scratch, and basically embedded in that solution a lot of very good and innovative technologies from the healthcare. Sensors, remote sensors, telemedicine, technologies that enables you to do for yourself the ENT examinations. So basically, in a way, forced us to jump right at the future of the digital health. And now this became the kind of flag. And now we have all the hospitals that have, first of all, every hospital now has an area for sick people with the corona, with the virus, but they're all using those technologies. And it brings us to, you know, the bigger question: how would the world look right after this horrible crisis?
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about here. Is on the other side is what does it look like? You mentioned digital. You mentioned the proliferation of that through the Sheba system and the ecosystem and the digital ecosystem in Israel, and especially in that Herzliya area where Triventures is. And I want to jump into that as well, because I want our viewers to understand what Triventures does and why in particular I wanted to connect with you, because you and your co-founder, Peter Fitzgerald, are at the forefront of a lot of these digital forward-facing technologies. Can you share a little bit about Triventures and how does that influence this digital ecosystem in Sheba and Interact, and how are we able to leverage that now because we've had those digital relationships?
Absolutely. Well, Triventures is a venture fund that is focused basically on digital health and medical devices. We started about a decade ago. We have offices, our main activity is here in Israel, and we have offices in the Bay Area. As you mentioned, it was co-founded by Peter Fitzgerald from Stanford, Marty Leon, and myself. And today we have a team that basically are at the edge of basically technologies. We were the first investors in Israel to start talking and then investing in digital health. That was about a decade ago when it wasn't popular at all. I remember the first time we talked about it at this stage, it wasn't even called digital health. We said when IT meets MedTech, MT, and people thought that we were crazy. But today, more than ever, I'm extremely happy that we took this bet and paved the road. Because at the time when we started talking about it, there wasn't any innovation. We had to pull in entrepreneurs to come and explain to them this convergence of worlds where MedTech is here and IT is here. And today we see this in spades. This is a sector that, as I'm sure you know, just last year had investments of over $15 billion. But the projections, and those are projections before the corona crisis, was that this sector of digital health will multiply itself by sixfold by 2025.
Yeah.
Grow from about $90 billion to over $500 billion. And I think that with this horrible situation that we are facing and undergoing, first of all, it's a universal experience, but the average person is basically forced to jump into a much more digitalized world. And I don't think we'll come back to the same point that we started with. And digital health, I think, is going to be even more meaningful. For many, many years, we've been talking about pushing the care from the hospitals to the clinics, to the community, and eventually to the home and to the mobile, right?
Mm-hmm.
Today, because we cannot touch our people, our patients, we cannot take care of everybody in the hospitals, we are forced to adopt new technologies that enable us to take care of those people. And a lot of those has to do with digital health technologies.
Yeah, and again, a lot of times it causes these unfortunate situations, and I don't even want to call it a black swan because a black swan infers that we didn't know this was coming. It absolutely those did know it was coming. I applaud you and the team for being those digital leaders. I was over there a few months ago with you and Herzliya in your headquarters there, and Herzliya is like Silicon Valley. When you go down there, you see Microsoft, you see all the players have the placards along the highway there. So, you bring up something interesting and earlier in the conversation that I don't want it to be lost too early is the idea of surveillance, and it's not a negative word, but that digital surveillance to be available when we need to mobilize in these critical situations. And having that digital connection with the patient, with the caregiver, with the physician who at scale can go ahead and touch hundreds of people where an analog function may be at best a dozen or 2 dozen. And those technologies, a lot of those are coming out of Israel. Why is that? Why is it so prolific there, the rate of innovation, especially on the digital side on a per capita basis?
Sure. Well, it's always several different factors incorporate something like that. The end of it is that Israel today is the second largest hub of innovation for digital health in the world, second just to Silicon Valley. We have over 600 companies, active companies in this space, in this little kind of island that has only 9 million people. And I think the reasons for that are several. One is that Israel was the first country in the world to digitalize our healthcare records. What most of the countries in the world, including yourself, have kind of pushed to digitalize all our electronic medical records just in the last 4 or 5 years, Israel started that 25 years ago. And so imagine a place that has 9 million people, they're all insured. They all have 25 years of longitudinal data from patient information, lab tests, imaging tests, genomic tests, everything is digitalized. So you have a huge reservoir of data. Now, over the years, basically for our internal purposes, we have developed systems that enable us to look at the data, to do operation on this data from different areas. So basically, I can go to my doctor, and he will see all the different visits that I've ever been in the system, even if I was in other hospitals. So this intraoperative kind of connectivity is very strong here. And basically, if you think about innovation in digital health, which is usually driven by data, you basically need two things. One, you need a lot of data, and you need to be able to query those data. So this is definitely a very big advantage of the healthcare system here. The fact that we have this, the fact that the healthcare organizations here have worked on those data to query and build algorithms from them for many years now. You add to that openness. One of the things, for example, that we at Triventures have done just last year was to build a unique partnership with the largest hospital in Israel, which is again Sheba Medical Center. Basically, we have a joint fund that for the first time in history here, our portfolio companies will not just get access to money or to our experience and our network and our strategic partners, but actually will have access to Shiva Medical Center data. And by that, you can really accelerate innovation and make it faster and more efficient, not only for piloting, but even for the data. So all that is one reason that I think Israel is first of all unique and has an unfair advantage. The second thing is that, we're very known for our talent base of smart engineers and data scientists working with data. So for many, many years, our tech industry thrived. But eventually, think about cloud computing, cybersecurity. What are they all doing? They're working with big data. What we've managed to do in the past decade, I would say, is open those reservoirs of data to those data scientists. And now we have kind of a tsunami of great talent, very, very experienced talent that have worked on big data for many years. And they're basically saying, tell us what's the problem, and we'll help figure out a solution and make an impact on the way. So we're enjoying a huge amount of talent base here. You add the good universities that we have here, a lot of technology people that are coming from the special units, the technological units in the army, that they get their experience in working on big data over there. So, it's like a perfect storm. And the government is supporting that with a lot of non-dilutive capital to do more pilots in Israel and to show the integration part. So you have talent, you have data, and you have places to pilot, and that's a very good thing. What we're missing is the market, and this is where you guys are so critical to the process, because I always say you can't innovate in a bubble. You have to adjust the solution to the problems, to the buyer, to the healthcare system. And for that, there has to be a connectivity. There has to be those bridges to make sure that we're not just inventing for the purpose of inventing, but really solving solutions that will be able to scale and integrate in where the market is. And it's definitely not in Israel.
Yeah, and so I think previous to just 30, 60, even 90 days ago, the U.S. market for digital certainly was the best place to be. And I think what we're seeing now in any history, not just modern history, we're now seeing that it's a worldwide battleground in this situation where we're fighting these viral enemies, and the digital side allows us to scale. We don't have inventory. We can employ predictive analytics. Countries like Israel and probably others too that have longitudinal data that allow us to track, and I use the word track, and surveil people when you hit this moment in time. You've got to pull the cover off that, and especially on these types of tsunamis of viruses, you're going to need to. The most important thing is being able to track where those people were, and then that can predict where that next sort of storm is going to be. Can you take me through a scenario through your eyes? And let's use Israel. Let's use this COVID-19 scenario, and let's use a patient who was just checked into Sheba, who is symptomatic. What is that world look like? Maybe it's today, and it'll declare itself 90 days from now. What does the leverage of digital do when I can have my entire medical record here? And in the U.S., EHRs are used for billing purposes, not to treat the patient. Let's call a spade on that. But in Israel, it sounds like it might be slightly different because you're not judged on it. Everybody has healthcare there. So what does that mean to the patient who comes in when they're digitally connected? Take me through that scenario, potentially.
So basically, a patient comes, and the doctors that receive him have all his electronic medical records, all his history, all his background, all his conditions. So first of all, they have it at their palm. And then
Smoker, where they live, are they coming from an area that has had a cluster of infections, and helping me triage this more quickly?
So first of all, let's say those are two different. I guess those are two different sets. One is exactly where all his medical information, right? All my personal medical information, all my lab clips from my history, all my imaging, all my history on the electronic medical record. And then in parallel, yes, they're tracking all the different people that got infected. They have a cluster, and they're constantly, it's like a war room where they see tracking everybody in terms of kind of exposure, like the blast of the virus, and then can provide more information to the healthcare community as well as to the municipally level where they can, now we're all in curfew, but earlier they put specific neighborhoods in curfew to try to avoid it before they put all the country under that. So first of all, yes, you have that. Plus, you have the people. They basically track your phone now, everybody's phone. So in a very automatic way, they will know where has this person been in the last several days. And in an automatic way, they send information, an SMS, to all the people that were close to him, physically close to him, without knowing who those people are. Just they're tracking signals, and every single person that was close to somebody like that gets an SMS and an indication that they have to be self-quarantined. So that's trying to avoid the expansion. But the people that are being tested and confirmed, depending on their status, they're getting, some of them are getting hospitalized. And there, at least the one I've seen in Shiva, they're being hosted or hospitalized in a hospital that every single patient has a room that has different air system. Nobody's touching the patients. There is a remote monitoring of every single kind of unit 24/7. The beds of those patients are equipped with sensors. One of the sensors, one of the companies that they're using their technology is called EarlySense. Basically, it's a sensor that without touching the patient could take all their vital signs. Basically, you put a sensor underneath the bed, and it takes information like movement, temperature, heart rate variability, respiratory rate, etc. This is by the way, a sensor that is FDA approved and CE mark, and is actually part of the Hillroom solution in their smart beds, as well as independently sold by EarlySense. But over the years, EarlySense have developed, collected billions and billions of data points, and generated algorithms that knows to predict things like, for example, until now we used it in hospitals to alert the medical team about a patient that is going to be septic. This is an infection in your blood. And it could tell the healthcare professionals about a day before a patient becomes septic, or 3 hours before patient gets a heart attack, a code blue.
So we can intervene before that happens and stop a catastrophic event.
Exactly. So you can intervene earlier. Now they've took those algorithms and basically are using it for the COVID-19, basically alerting whenever there is going to be a deterioration, so the intervention could be earlier. This is just one of the examples. Another technology that is being used is called TytoCare. Basically, it's an ENT examination that is used today for telemedicine. So instead of going to the doctor, if I have a child or I want to test myself, I could use this technology, which is basically a stethoscope in ear and throat examination that basically I can put to myself or put on my child, and the doctor will see the results from remote. So all of a sudden, you can do a lot of those testing that are usually done by doctors, by seeing, by touching, by feeling in a remote way. Today, we're using those remote 10 meters away. But think about it, once you're doing it 10 meters away, you can do it 10 kilometers away or 100 kilometers away.
Yeah. Yeah, the technology is just fascinating. You and I have watched it, as you said, for at least a decade, and certain people like yourself and Peter Fitz and Marty and others in our industry have been shouting from the mountaintops, please see this, see this. I don't think any of us potentially saw the use in the current state of the world, but it's so obvious that this answers a lot of challenges along the way. Um, it, it's super valuable to have you here with us from Israel. I'd like to be able to, if possible, call you from time to time because I don't think this is going away anytime super soon. And it sounds like it's a very dynamic situation in Israel with what's going on there. Could we do that with you?
Absolutely, with pleasure. And we're here, we're seeing that we're glad to share our perspective of the story. I am a great believer that, we will suffer before we will get better. But after we will lick our wounds, the number of opportunities that we'll be able to enjoy, not only in healthcare, but certainly in healthcare, are tremendous. I do think that after we are getting used to do something in a certain way, we will not go back. After, we just saw FDA open a little bit the regulation for telemedicine, doing remote visits for clinical trials. If we get used to doing all those things, going back will be a waste. And I hope that we will not go back. So we're already kind of in the future. And I think the number of opportunities that we will be able to enjoy are tremendous. And I'll be very happy to be part of that conversation.
I appreciate your time. Take care of yourself, your family, and all my friends over there. And again, I appreciate the time today, Michal.
Thank you. And please keep safe as well, okay?
I will. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
This has been Joe Mullings with The Other Side.